Anything you say from now on can and will be used against you.
Yeah. I get very angry.
And then I turn off the volume of this one again. Hey, Etienne. He's the student who
Okay.
started this.
It's all your fault.
Very happy to have her details.
Yes. Okay. I'm afraid this is probably the wrong way to spell Lucy's. I think what the right way is. And actually, this is Lucy, and this one is Lucia. And my plan, or rather my intention, was to talk about the two cases and show the similarities, which are huge. And this was a Dutch case which sort of started in about 2000. And was concluded with, in 5 years of police investigation and court cases, it ended up with this lady being in jail for life for a large number of murders and attempted murders of her patients. And initially, the only real evidence against her was the correlation between her presence and suspicious events. And in fact, a statistician who was a colleague and friend of mine, he's now a former friend of mine, but he told the court that the chance that there would be so many events, so many bad events in her shifts by chance was 1 in 342 million. And at that point, lots of people suddenly started believing that this woman was an evil killer. And that was in a trial in 2003. There was an appeal, there was a retrial in 2004. And that time, the prosecution actually didn't use statistics anymore because there had been lots of debate in the newspapers and so on. I think I was even on TV a few times explaining probability or statistics or something like that. And people were upset. Well, people just didn't like the idea that you should send somebody to jail just because of some probability calculation, that they were always there when bad things happened, without any proof whatsoever, apart from that, any real proof. And so the next trial, she got convicted again, and then in 2005, she was convicted yet again. She went from a lower court to a higher court to the court, whatever. Supreme Court, yeah, went up to the Supreme Court. And but in 2005, suddenly people started appearing and explaining that she could be innocent and that there were all kinds of things wrong with the trial. And I only got involved at that point in 2005, and I worked really with and for a couple of whistleblowers who were a medical doctor and a philosopher of science, actually, who was studied, research was in why you believe things and argumentation and so on. And they uncovered a lot of sort of suspicious things about the whole trial. And we spent 5 years fighting to get her out of jail. I took this photograph in 2009. She'd just been let out of jail before a new trial would start in autumn 2009, and in 2010 she got completely exonerated. right? And the judges then went out of their way actually to say, you know, you're not guilty. But they actually went on to say, we know that there were no murders whatsoever. So, I mean, they really said more than just, you know, in a guilty means beyond reasonable doubt. And so not guilty means, it could mean that there's doubt. There could be a lot of doubt. But they made clear that there was no doubt whatsoever. And actually that's, but anyway, that episode got me out of my then main field and into forensic statistics, and I got involved in 2 more serial killer nurse cases, and I think succeeded with an Italian colleague in getting an Italian nurse out of jail, and I didn't succeed at working for a British lawyer to get a British nurse out of jail. He's still in jail, but he's innocent. But anyway, and anyway, so when this case started, I was kind of activated, and I'll tell you a little bit of the history of my involvement in the Lucy Letby case, which is it's now 2025, and it could be that right now is kind of the turning point where the British public are starting to understand that maybe this was a miscarriage of justice. But she's in jail for with I think 14 full life sentences, or for 7 murders and 7 attempted murders. And full life means you only come out of jail in your coffin, right? So she's put away, and all 14 convictions have to be overturned in order to let her out. But people are fighting at the moment. And my main activity at the moment actually is agitating. I spend most of my time on X fighting idiots, which is something I quite enjoy actually.
You're not the only one.
Sorry?
No, joke.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of them around. So, yeah, I did do something important, I think, in the run-up to her trial. I'll say that right now. So her trial started in, my God, 2022, I think. And then a couple of years before that, I was working with colleagues in the Royal Statistical Society, which is one of the biggest, basically international scientific society of statisticians and probabilists, but it's the British one, the Royal Statistical Society. And together we wrote a booklet based on our experience of previous cases, like the Italian one, and Lucy Letby and some more. And there were 5 authors, 2 of them were lawyers, 3 of us were statisticians. And we wrote this booklet pointing out all the ways that this kind of case can go wrong and what should be done in order to prevent that. And we didn't know what the evidence was going to be against Lucy Letby at the time. So it was just like an abstract exercise. We will compile our wisdom. And we wrote a very beautiful report, and we sent it to everybody involved in that trial, prosecution and the defense, and we sent it to journalists and so on. But basically, we were too late because the police had already made every mistake in the book, in our book, so, as I will show you. And yeah, right, let's get moving, because if I dwell on details, well, I mean, I could be here all day, and you certainly won't be here all day. So the similarities between these 2 cases are really very striking. They're at a very high sort of global level, and these basic 3 ingredients, well, and what's below as well, that whole list can be seen in several other cases where many people are, in some cases, know for sure that somebody's innocent. I mean, they've been exonerated. The Italian nurse case is just like this, and she's free now, but through work I did together with my Italian colleague. And among other things. Yeah, so this happens again and again, and you can sort of, it's like red flags. If a nurse is sent to jail because there has been an inexplicable spike in deaths on a medical unit, where deaths are usual, maybe not very many deaths, but on a place where people die, there are nurses working and there are doctors working. And the thing is, doctors make mistakes and nurses get blamed. It's really actually that bloody simple, if you pardon my language. But this happens again and again, that there is some spike in the rate of people dying on some hospital ward, and it becomes associated with a nurse, particular nurse for some reason or other. And then within the hospital, suspicion, it has started. It's like a viral idea. Somebody gets the idea, oh my God, maybe we're having all these deaths because we have a killer nurse. And that is a particularly weird nurse. And then it's like a virus which grows and infects maybe the hospital management, and at some point it infects the police, and then you get a trial, and then the nurse goes to jail. But okay, this you could say is statistical. I would say this is seeing a correlation and then deducing that it's causation is a basic statistical thing, which happens again and again, and it's often wrong because there can be many innocent reasons for correlation. And in fact, in the two Lucy cases, the explanation is not really innocent, but it's simply that events are called suspicious because the nurse was there. So, of course, she's always there when something suspicious happens, because it's defined to be suspicious because she's there. Right? So you kind of don't need to do any statistics or know any statistics to know that that's a pretty stupid way of going about things. But that's basically all that is in these cases, because in these cases there is no direct proof at all that anybody did anything wrong. Anybody, let alone a nurse. There's no direct medical proof that somebody has been murdered, let alone that it was this particular nurse who did it. And that means that if this gets to a trial and it gets to a conviction, then the court has got to be convinced by something more as well. And this is what you always see. You see a kind of character destruction of the nurse by showing that she has written strange things or said strange things. And in the Lucy Letby case, she wrote some weird things in her diary. And moreover, she wrote some weird things on days that persons had died. Well, she also wrote weird things on days when people hadn't died. And she had a perfectly good explanation for the weird things she wrote. But that she wrote weird things when people died was one of the things which clinched the matter for Lucia, the Dutch one, 20 or so years ago. In the Lucy Letby case, there are some post-it notes, green sticker notes, on which nurse Lucy Letby wrote some stuff, and I will show you what she wrote in a moment on one of the most important ones. And in both cases, the prosecution in the trial interprets these writings as confessions. So if you go and walk in the streets of London and talk to somebody, if they've heard about the case, they probably will say to you, well, but she confessed, didn't she? Because this is also what the media uses, because in these cases, there is enormous media attention. Imagine a suspicion that a nurse has been killing a whole load of patients at your local hospital. Lucy Letby, the Dutch one, worked at the Juliana Children's Hospital in The Hague, close by here. You can imagine that, you know, the media, the newspapers, everybody was terribly shocked when they heard the rumours of it. And later, when the trial was going on, and you see this in the Lucy Letby case too, the prosecution story is the story which makes fantastic newspaper. So in some of these cases, I've heard the prosecution is speaking, and the journalists, the court journalists, are sitting there scribbling it all down, and then when the prosecution has finished talking, they go outside and rush to send a copy to their newspapers so that their newspapers get it first. They don't even bother to listen to the defense. In the Lucy Letby case, it's very clear that Lucy Letby was basically convicted by the public long before the trial started. Okay, so there's that. Well, a little bit more goes a long way, and in both cases, there is some suggestion of that the patient has been poisoned. And in the Lucy Letby case, there was a toxicological investigation carried out at a post-mortem of a child who died in this children's hospital, and it determined that there seemed to be digoxin in the blood of the child, sorry. I think she was 6 months. Okay, so it's kind of a baby. Baby Amber. There was a digoxin there, which is a heart medication. I take one digoxin pill every day, but if I would take 30, I would drop dead. Right, so quite a useful thing to know. But okay, digoxin is a standard. It's digitalis, foxgloves. There's flowers with the purple, beautiful purple flowers you see in the forest. Digitalis. So there seemed to be evidence that one patient had been harmed by somebody giving digoxin, and allegedly it wasn't supposed to be given digoxin, and the Dutch nurse Lucia had opportunity and means. She was like the last person who'd been with the child. So together with her, with her confession, the case of that child was the most convincing one. And once you believe that Lucia murdered that child, she's a liar because she says she's innocent. From now on, you can choose what you want to believe or not believe out of what she says. And she's a lying killer. And you don't need so much evidence to convict her for yet more cases. So in the Lucy Letby case, she was charged with like 14. And most of the trials were sort of haggling about whether she should be convicted of 8 or 10 or 12 or all 14. And basically, the ones at the end of the line, there was basically no evidence at all. But okay, there were too many, right? And she was there too much, and so on and so forth. So she got a whole list of convictions. And in Lucy Letby, but really the same thing happened because there are two. Lucy Letby worked in a neonatal intensive care ward. That's important to say, at a hospital called the Countess of Chester. And Countess of Chester, well, actually, that used to be Lady Di. It's the wife of the Count of Chester, and the Count of Chester is the heir to the British crown. So now it's either Harry or the other guy's wife is now the Countess of Chester. But okay, it's the name of the hospital, and when it was rebuilt at some point, Lady Di came to the opening, and so they have this connection to royalty. But okay, it's not important. But I should tell you, it's like Chester is a pretty small, a pretty town, a smallish town. It's kind of on the border between Wales and England, and Chester means it's from the Latin castrum, a castle, and it was a Roman fort, kind of protecting the civilized inside from the wild Welsh tribes on the other side, and later in medieval times, basically the same. Of course, the British slowly, I should say the English, slowly conquered and assimilated the Welsh. It has got the city walls, the medieval city walls are a square, a mile, each side is a mile, and you can walk all the way around them because they're there. And it's fantastic, you know, these fantastic views over in the distance, you see the Welsh mountains. So it's like a historical town, but it's a country town, you know, with a big market and so on. And I should also mention it's not far from Liverpool. And in Liverpool, there are very big hospitals. There are big university hospitals, you know, like the university hospital here, where there are people doing research and so on, and teaching. So there were 2 babies which appeared to have been poisoned with insulin. And right, and then these things. So those are the similarities. And here's Lucy Letby's confession, and it's an enormous mess. And it says at the top, not good enough. Here it says, hate myself. Desperate, panic, fear, lost. Why me? I did this. That looks like a confession, right? I killed them. It says I killed them. Somewhere, if you look carefully out here, you can hardly see it. It says something like it. They said. So she's writing what people said about her, possibly. When I showed this at the Netherlands Forensic Institute, they said, "Oh, and was a forensic analysis done of this document?" And I said no. And I said, "Oh my God, in England they're so primitive." But no psychologist has looked at this. And told the court what they see, and no forensic analysis has been done to unpack the layers of writing, which you can do. I mean, they can do that at the Netherlands Forensic Institute, not far away in The Hague nowadays, and they could have sent it to a good forensic science lab and found out what is written underneath the various layers, which you can't see. You know, but it also says, I feel very alone. What does the future hold? How I can get through it? How will things ever be like they used to be, I suppose?
But it also says I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It says everything all jumbled up together. Yeah.
Well, like the last thing, like I am evil, I did this.
I am evil, I did this.
I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough.
Okay.
It's also written there. A bit
Okay.
higher.
Okay.
And then I'm evil, I did this.
Yeah, yeah. Now, now, what we later discovered, well, first of all, I think if you read this, you see somebody who's considering suicide and is totally stressed and out of their mind with worry, and they're just writing everything down, all the thoughts which are going through their head all the time. And on the left is basically the good thoughts, and on the right are the bad thoughts. And it's not really clear that they are her thoughts, but they are the words which she keeps hearing in her head, right? And she was, I mean, when she was in court, by the time she appeared in court, she was sedated and having under psychiatric treatment and totally depressed, and obviously had PTSD. She appeared in court, she was like a zombie. And the journalist showed, I looked into her eyes and I didn't see anything there, you know, but I mean, she was the walking dead. because her ordeal had gone on for so many years before, which I will tell you in a moment. Anyway, so this is a sort of, oh yeah, and only recently, after the conviction and so on and everything, after she's been convicted, now everything is fixed, because I'll explain there have been attempts to appeal, but they have been thwarted by the system, and so she is in jail for all her life for 14 really serious crimes, and basically there's nothing more anybody can do unless some new evidence turns up. But there's not going to be any new evidence, right? I'm very unlikely that suddenly somebody else is going to admit to these crimes, for instance. This is not going to happen. Oh yeah, it turned out that she was wrote this as advice from a counsellor, the human resources, a psychologist from the human resources department of her own hospital gave her the advice to do this, and it's called journaling. So if ever you're depressed, this is not something you can do. Just write everything down, and then, but for God's sake, destroy it afterwards. But Lucy Letby was a hoarder. She hoarded pieces of paper. And so when she was arrested and the police raided her house, they found bags of paper all over the place, and under her bed and so on and so forth. And they went through it all with a very fine tooth comb, and they found this, among other things. Okay, I better move on. This is a summary. I'm not going to read this. In fact, I think I'm going to skip this slide in the next one. But it's a little summary of the prosecution point of view, published on their website, and basically reproduced in all the British newspapers at the time she was convicted. Actually, they published this in the week before, she was actually sentenced. So she had been convicted, but the judge had not yet told the court what the sentences were. And it's published, and it's from a website of the Crown Prosecution Service, so CPS. And there are lots of sort of giveaways here. She used a variety of methods to secretly attack a total of 13 babies. She did it in secret, and nobody saw that she did it. Right? That's very evil. That's just like Lucy Letby. She was also so refined that nobody could see how she killed her victims. The judges used that as an argument for her guilt. Right? So everything is turned around. Okay, I'll get onto this. Unable to find a medical explanation. Here's a whole list of different ways which Lucy Letby allegedly killed her victims. She used milk and she used air. And in one case, she's supposed to sort of hit the baby. And sometimes she injected air, and sometimes she forced it down feeding tubes. It's a bit weird. And allegedly, these attacks with air caused something called air embolism, which is when you get a bubble of air in your blood, and then things go wrong. Right? So, but it's a very unusual method of murder. There has been, I mean, you can murder somebody by injecting air into their veins, or in their veins and arteries. Right? You have to choose the right one. And I forget which one. There are two kinds, but it's an incredible variety of ways she has killed and harmed her patients. And I will tell you how these were deduced. I mean, who found them? Okay, and there's a whole list of more stuff, key evidence, like the medical records, and some were falsified, and she changed the timings. So there was huge arguments in court about whether she was alone with some babies on this day during these hours. And there is a document where there's a time written which looks as if it's been changed. Or no, it looks like it's been filled in later. And actually, nurses often fill in the stupendous amount of forms they have to fill in. They often do that later. And sometimes one of them does it for one of the other ones. And so there are completely innocent explanations for all these things, but you see these trivia are being interpreted to show how evil she is. Okay, all the intrusive curiosity about the parents or babies she had harmed. So she was kind of addicted to Facebook, and she often looked up on Facebook the families of her patients. And actually, if you look at the correlation between the families she looked up on Facebook and the families of the babies she's supposed to have harmed, the correlation is zero. I mean, if only if the police had actually shown the court the numbers, you would see that this is bullshit, to say but of course, it's called an intrusive curiosity, and it's been presented by the media as she. Some of the medical documents she kept, she was keeping trophies. But if you look at the medical documents which she has at home, which are just notes which nurses write at the end of a shift to write a quick summary of what is on the shift at the moment, and it's used to give to the next nurses coming into the new shift. Similarly, the notes, the handover notes which she has at home are totally uncorrelated with the babies she was supposed to have killed, but they are interpreted by the police and by the media as trophies, serial killer collecting trophies. Okay, I am evil, I did this. Right. Now I just want to, put a little time, because I'm afraid it's probably going very fast. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about some sort of notable aspects of the trial, points in the trials, and what's going on. So basically, I'm going to tell you like the history and where we are now. And the important thing about this trial was that actually before Lucy, before the police were brought in, and before a police investigation started, and before there were trials and so on and so forth, there was actually a battle going on between the 7 pediatricians. So that's children's doctors, but 7 consultant pediatricians. So these are specialists. These are the top of the medical hierarchy. The hospital had 7 pediatricians. And incidentally, it did not have a neonatologist, but it did have a neonatology unit, right? So it's a bit odd, because they didn't actually have any specialist who was specialized in the care of very, very young babies. Anyway, these 3 were kind of the leaders of the 7 who who became suspicious of Lucy Letby and were trying for a year to get her taken off the ward. And they were telling the management again and again, we think Lucy Letby is harming babies. And again and again, the management investigated, and there was no proof. Because all there was Lucy Letby was often there when things happened, and some of them were a bit mysterious. But these guys went on to win a prize for whistleblowing, because they had tried to warn management in order to stop Lucy Letby killing babies, and they got this prize for it, because finally they succeeded in getting to the police. Now, if any medical doctor in England who suspects somebody else of harming a patient is actually morally and legally obliged to report it to the police, and they didn't for a year. But they kept nagging the management to remove Lucy, like, you know, fire her and let her get a job somewhere else, which is a bit strange thing to do if you suspect somebody of murdering babies. But they associated her with the deaths, which they didn't really understand. I think because they're incompetent. There are 3 names: Jairam, Breary, and Gibbs. This is Gibbs. He's the oldest one, and he was about retiring. So he used to be like the boss, the big boss, and now he's thinking about his gardening. And actually now he's training to become a Church of England priest, I've heard, because he's a deeply religious man. These 2 were the guys actually running the neonatal intensive care unit where Lucy worked. And this guy called Steve Breary, he was the neonatology lead, which means he's responsible for everything medical concerning neonatology. He's not a neonatologist, but it's like his hobby. And this guy, Ravi Jayaram, is an interesting guy. He is this guy's sidekick, you could say, mate. He was the pediatrics lead, and he was a very ambitious TV doctor. He spent most of his time not at the hospital, but filming a series for the BBC. And those two were close friends. And these two, you'll see if I go fast enough. I want to show you just a couple more pictures to sort of get some idea that there are real people here. This is the judge, right, who went to Charterhouse School and then went to Durham University. So that's not quite Eton and then Oxford or Cambridge, but it's the next, it's close. So he's a member of the British elite, and he made a large number of extraordinary rulings in the case. The judge in the UK basically controls what evidence will be put to the jurors. Now, there is a discussion before the trial between the judge and the lawyers of the two sides, and so the defense asked for certain pieces of evidence to be shown, and this guy, again and again, disallowed the applications of the defendant. And he has a reputation for basically knowing in advance what the outcome of the trial should be. This can be seen from other trials. He's probably about retired now, and as soon as he's out of the game, the better. Now, this is a very odd person. He's a Welshman, Dowie, so he's called Dowie Evans. He's written down in English, his first name is David. And this guy, I'll tell you what he did later. He was the lead expert for the prosecution. And how he came involved in the case is a bit mysterious. He suddenly turned up at the police station and offered his advice. And then he basically led the police investigation with the assistance of Breary and Jayaram. So actually, the top clinical people at the hospital, they basically ran the police investigation. Now, that's one of the things which should never have happened, obviously. And then I want to show you this lady. Here's another. This is a baroness, Lady Justice Thirlwall, and she looks a bit odd. And she's now running an inquiry whose purpose has been set up by the government. I'm probably running completely out of time. Well, maybe I've got 10 minutes, right? I think, yeah, about 15 maybe. She's running an inquiry, a statutory inquiry. It means people can be heard under, under oath. It can call witnesses and people put their hand on the book and swear to tell the truth and so on. And her job is to investigate why management stopped the consultants from going to the police. That's the task, right? Because Lucy Letby is in jail for life many times over. So legally, she's a serial killer, and it's a huge scandal. How could this possibly have happened? Well, the idea is to find out if the blame can be given to management. So that's the task of the Thirlwall inquiry. Now, and actually, anybody who believes Lucy Letby is innocent is not allowed to speak at the Thirlwall inquiry. You basically have to accept that she is guilty. And despite this, some brave people have been saying things like, I don't think Lucy Letby did anything wrong, but very few. Very few. But Thirlwall is busy as a beaver digging up all kinds of information about the history of the police investigation and the state of affairs at the hospital. And it's generating again and again fantastic material to get Lucy out of jail. So that's probably why she's looking a bit cross, because basically she's been confronted day after day after day with evidence for Lucy's innocence, but she's got to produce a report under the assumption that Lucy is guilty. And there has been calls for the inquiry to be stopped or for the terms of reference to be rewritten, but nothing has happened. Government, nobody wants to. It's a big mess, and nobody wants to have responsibility for solving the mess, which is problematic. Okay, I think I'm trying to skip. Well, yeah. So there's a lot of, that should be inquisitorial system, but British criminal justice is very different from Dutch criminal justice. But if you don't know much about Dutch criminal justice, it's possibly many of you don't. It doesn't. It's not important. But in Britain, you have a jury, a bit like on American TV, and the American system is derived from the British, and it's also there in Australia and New Zealand and Canada, and in all kinds of African countries and so on. So you have a judge running an inquiry to find out what is the truth, and in front of the judge are two barristers who are these guys with these wigs and gowns, and they are fighting. So it's actually theatre. It's a kind of gladiatorial fight between two highly educated people wearing incredible ancient garments, and it makes great TV. And in the Netherlands we don't do it like that, but the Netherlands system also makes terrible mistakes too. So there's really no difference, especially when there's no evidence. If there's like no evidence, then the whole system's starting to screw up, basically. There's another difference, and that is in the Netherlands, law is written down in books, and it's passed by Parliament. It's called statutory law. The law is all written out in law books, and it's been written by, possibly it's been written by lawyers, but it's been passed by Parliament. So, and it's sort of fixed. Of course, it can be changed from time to time. But in England, they do it their way, which is they make everything up as they go along, basically, which is how the British do everything, really. It's a nation of amateurs. So every time there's judges in high-profile cases make rulings, and the rulings are sort of rules which are now introduced, and then later other judges can refer to them, saying the case of somebody versus somebody, so and so, the judge ruled this, and judges like not to think, but just to be able to cite the arguments of previous judges, which is because that's how it works. And so that means that actually judges themselves write the law in England, and nobody can control them because there's separation of the powers, right? You have an independent judiciary. But it's a bit like Iran, you know. I mean, you have the place is run by, well, sort of the king, and then there's the House of Lords, where all the bishops and all the top judges are in the upper house of Parliament, and they are making the law, and nobody can stop them. Well, in principle, the lower house, Parliament, could do things, but they prefer not to do anything, and the government prefers not to do anything because it's all, you know, they have an excuse for not doing anything because of the separation of the powers. Right. Okay. See what I can do of this in a pretty short time. So basically I'm going to show you some data in a little while, but I mean, it's not going to be very much data, and it's not data you can do much with because of the way it was collected. But there's a period of 18 months, January 2015 to June 2016, when there was this incredible spike in deaths on this unit that used to be 2 or 3 deaths a year, perhaps, all very explainable too, and more or less expected. And thereafter also, But during those 18 months, there were 18 deaths. That's one a month, right? That's different from 2 or 3 a year. Strikingly different. And everybody saw it and nobody understood it. And actually still, it's not being figured out what was going on. I have my hypothesis, which I would hopefully be able to share with you. But now, that period starts with Lucy Letby getting a high diploma. So she is now one of the most highly qualified nurses in the neonatal intensive care unit. That's what NICU is. And at the end of that period, because of the repeated attempts by the consultant pediatricians to get her out of their sight, she is taken off nurse duties and she's given administrative work. And the death rate goes back to what it used to be. But actually more things happened too, but that was not told in court. So she was, sorry, I have written it here. The unit was demoted from level 2 to level 1. So there are like 3 categories of neonatal intensive care. And the higher the number, it means that you can care for more and more premature and severely afflicted infants. And so in a level 3 unit, you can care babies who are born at 23 weeks, or 22 weeks, which is basically the lower limit of there being a possibility of survival, to a kind of normal life. There are many born at 23, so many born at 23 weeks and cared for in the NICU survive, but like half of them die in the first week. And the ones which survive to 40 weeks, half of them don't. And the other half, many of them have handicaps for life because of brain damage and so on. So this unit was, on paper, it was level 2, so they could go back to 28 weeks. In July 2016, it was put down to level 1, so they suddenly did not have such premature babies anymore. Babies are, and I'll show you the babies in a moment, you can see how premature they were. The definition of levels 1, 2, 3 is more complex because it also takes account of birth weight and whether you're a twin or not a twin, and whether it's artificial insemination, what's it called anyway, assisted conception, so on and so forth. There are all kinds of things which also contribute to making the expectations more bad. So this is just part of the definition of those levels. Now, and the hospital did the right thing, which was they called in an independent review by experts, and they found a whole heap of things very badly wrong. And I tried to go fast. But still nobody understood why the death rates had gone up. Of course, we understand why it went down, but we don't know why it went up in January around then. And but then the doctors got to the police. Dr. Dowie Evans, who I showed you a picture of, turned up at the police station, having seen an announcement of the police investigation in the newspaper. And he said, I thought this would be a case for me, my kind of case. Because he had he was retired as a doctor, but he had a business of being an expert in legal cases involving children when there was medical evidence involved. So these would be typically child custody cases where one parent accuses the other of damaging the child. And he boasted, in my experience, I had 41 cases and I won 40 of them. Now, this is not what an expert is supposed to. This shows he's a guy who is paid by one side or the other and then goes for them. And he basically said that out loud. Okay, Yes. Right. Now, okay, so then a long time went by and there were trials and more and another trial. And I want to mention here that for 3 long years, from the beginning of the first trial to the end of a second trial, the media were not allowed to criticize the prosecution case. It's called contempt of court. The idea is the jury must not be influenced by, it's a crime to try to influence the jury. And this rule, which has got a sound rationale, was used to prevent the media from writing about the criticisms which did start coming out more and more about the case. But on the other hand, anybody who wanted to write about the psychology of serial killers was welcome to do so. So the rule was used to advantage the prosecution. Lucy Letby applied for appeals, but the applications were rejected. So you do not automatically get an appeal in the British system. Because first it has to go through a judge, sorry. First it has to go to the same judge who's just convicted you. So you can imagine what he did. And then it goes to 3 judges and you can imagine what they did because they all understand what they did. Right. So that's what's going on. Okay. Now, but in May 2024, so that's while the first trial, long trial, 10-month trial was going on, an American journalist published a fantastic article, and she interviewed me and many other people, questioning the convictions. It's a masterpiece and it's very long. And the article was geo-blocked in the UK because nobody must be able to read it. It has been geo-blocked still quite recently because of the contempt of court rules. Okay, things are moving now. And just recently, I can't tell you about that. A doctor has turned up from Canada and he got 14 of his mates together, or 13 of his mates and him, have gone through all the medical notes of all the babies in the trial and concluded for every single one of them that it was a natural event. And in 2 cases, that maybe the consultants themselves accidentally killed the babies. And there's an application going now to reopen the case, and there's an organization which can deal with that application. Okay, I'll quickly show you a few more slides, but kind of things are looking up at the moment. This is the main the main evidence which the police have given to the court, which is 25 events pertaining to children A through Q. They don't seem to understand the alphabetical order because it goes J, K, M, L, and then N. So this is a bit tricky for the British police. You see, child I was attacked 5 times and only murdered, successfully attacked the 5th time. But so but these were 25 charges on the indictment against Lucy. And the police have looked up which nurses were present at these events, and only Lucy is present at all of them. And these are presence on a shift where a suspicious event has been identified. So you have to know, of course, who identifies suspicious events and how. And we still don't quite know. The defense has asked to be told, and the judge turned down the request. But this is sort of statistical, right? A correlation, okay? Many people say this proves he's guilty. I said this proves the police are totally incompetent and people are not asking the right questions. And it's idiotic because you go through a whole year and you have lots and lots of shifts. And by the way, all these nurses are different kinds of nurses, and some of them are part-time, some of them only work for a few days or a few weeks. So there are other factors which explain why some of these nurses are often there and others are not. I'll go on. if I may. Only 1 minute, okay. Yeah, I want to show this. Well, here you see A through Q again. And there's also an R. These are interesting things, which are only slowly becoming clear. Twins, twins, twins. A triplet. Two surviving siblings of a twin. Their brother or sister died in the womb. So actually, these are twin pregnancies. And I've been talking to an expert on twins, and she's explaining that many of those twins have got some really, really bad things. There's something called TTTS, twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, which means that the blood from the mother goes to one of the twins, and then it goes from that twin to the other one. And typically, if they're born, you have two babies. One is big, one is small, one is pink, and one is white. And this should be detected during pregnancy, and things can be done about it. So the question is, why the hell were these babies being treated at this grotty hospital unit? That's the question, which nobody knows. Many of the mothers were actually being treated pre-birth at top research hospitals in Liverpool. Why in the hell were they allowed to give birth in Chester? That's the question. See if there's anything else I have to tell you. No. Well, I will. There's lots of things here. I will stop with this one. I put stars here, and this is just looking at the weeks. The weeks of gestation, how premature those babies were. And there's 1, 2, 3 3-star babies. Those babies should never have gone to a hospital, to a level 1 neonatal unit. They needed level 3 care. And that's just looking at the weeks of gestation, the prematurity. If you would take account of birth weight and various other factors, there would be more triple stars there. So there were extremely sick babies going to the hospital. And basically what I want to say now is those paediatricians who accused Lucy Letby to the police should have, well, known that what the explanation of the spike was. The spike was caused, in my opinion, by the hospital admitting babies which they couldn't care for. And the responsible people were those consultants we saw. They should have known, but they made the police imagine that they didn't have a faintest idea why the numbers had gone up. So I say to you, they lied to the police. I'll stop you.
Yeah, so looking at this actually at the end, seems interesting. So do you know when the hospital reached level 2?
Well, it was classified as level 2 1 or 2 years before this all started.
Okay.
But it basically was not operating as a level 2 because the hospital had been cutting costs and they'd been firing all the senior nurses. And when the RCPCH, the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, came in, they said this is a level 1 unit, and it has been a level 1 unit since then. So it was on paper, it was level 2. It had ambitions to become more important and big and so on. And by the way, the amount of money a hospital gets from the National Health Service depends on the acuity of the cases. So by actually accepting level 3 babies, they were making more money. That could also be a motive here. But the Dr. Breary, who I see as the really evil one here, he had ambitions and he had connections with the pediatricians in Liverpool. And his name is on research papers that are published by a consortium of hospitals about neonatal mortality. There's a possibility, actually, a very evil possibility, that babies are being sent from Liverpool to Chester in order to improve the statistics in Liverpool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
But did Lucy actually mention like that there were like unusually not healthy the babies that died, or she mentioned it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, everybody saw that they were having many more deaths, and they thought that's why they were having many more deaths. And so she knew, basically everybody knew. But the reason why they were having this was not something which the nurses knew, because that's the question, depends on the admissions policy. And nobody knew, and the management probably didn't know. The top clinicians in the hospital are sort of responsible for this. Though also there are things like if a woman goes into labour and gets to the closest hospital, then the hospital has got to care for her anyway. So maybe some of these just turned up there because of coincidence, or the family wanted it. And a number of the babies were transferred from the Countess of Chester to the places where they should have been born later. And some of them died there, and some of them got better there. Yeah. But by the way, the judge forbade any discussion about the state of the ward, the unit. He said we're going to go through these 25 indictments one by one, and it's just medical. And the prosecution is going to go through all 25 first. And then the defense may go through all 25. I think that's idiocy. It should be interleaved. There's this murder claim. There's some medical experts for the prosecution. Then you want to hear what the medical experts for the defense have to say. But they were not allowed to say that until weeks or months later.
Yeah, it mostly with regard to like the statistical side of this thing, because I suppose during like investigation of these cases they call like experts, like mathematical experts, or however you want to call it.
Yes.
But is there any control on the things they said? Is there like a peer review or some sort of, because
No.
like an expert can go there
No,
and just say
actually,
wrong facts.
both the prosecution and the defense consulted with a statistician before the trial, and even the police were consulting with a statistician, and then the Crown Prosecution Service told them to drop that line of inquiry. So the prosecution forbade the police to go into the statistics. The defense did talk to a statistician, but didn't use it. And the state of, there are a lot of things wrong with the British system, and they are exposed by this case.
So could you have done what you do now and have been doing for the last couple of years on this case? Could you have done that while being employed at a university here?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, I'm retired, but I'm still connected to University of Leiden, and I let the people there, my sort of superiors, management, know when I'm doing things in order to kind of cover my back, because
But I mean, you use the word idiot
yes,
quite a lot.
yes.
And so what people tend to do when they hear themselves being called an idiot,
Yes.
is they tend to call your dean and try
Yes.
to silence you.
Well, I know several people have called the dean, trying to silence me, but so far they've been laughed at.
And your dean laughed at them.
As far as I know, because well, so far I've had complaints about me made by basically internet trolls, by amateurs. And they have put in complaints to the dean and so on and so forth. And these have been completely ignored because these are idiots. And so far, none of the people I hear accused of really bad doing have said anything and probably won't. During the trial, when I published a blog with my thoughts about it, during the time when contempt of court was valid, I did that when I was in the Netherlands, and I got a letter from the police saying that next time I come into England, I can be arrested. And I will get, I forget if it's 2 years or 5 years in jail, and the costs of repeating the trial. And I got it by email. And then 2 weeks later, Apeldoorn police knocked on my door in the night to deliver the same letter on paper and to verify that I had received the letter and check my passport to see that I had indeed. So that was actually Chester Constabulary trying to suppress me. Well, they did it to a couple other people too. Yeah. Well, okay, so.
Okay, I think we should continue this discussion in the bar downstairs.
Thank you very much. Okay,
I didn't tell you about the differential equation, so I did show you.
I stop recording.
So I think